We're opening up and diving into a student project today. If you've gone through my sports stats tutorial series, first off, thank you. And secondly, I'd love to see what you made. So if you want to tag me at Baller Effects here on YouTube or on IG at MotionJP. So today, I had a student reach out to me with a project that was made based on that tutorial series. Kat went through the series and made a graphic for an MMA fighter and asked me for feedback and generously provided me with the project. Although I'm not going to take this all the way to the finish line, I've been receiving a lot of comments asking to see how things are done. So I thought this was a great way to open up a project, jump into After Effects, and make some adjustments. Let's first talk about what I think Kat is doing well here. I like the different shapes and how those gloves come in for a point of impact. And changing to a different scene here and how this reveal is working. Sharing different colors. And I think this board here is probably the one that I am probably not going to touch at all. So when I open this project, there's a few things that I think would be helpful to touch on. And I'm not going to get to everything, but I at least want to highlight a couple things that will help bring this together a little bit more. So one of those is the gloves here. And after the gloves hit, there's a point of impact here. And the background octagon changes and scales up. But it doesn't have as much impact as it could have. So we'll hop in there and take a look at that. I like how we come into this frame. I think we can exit a little bit easier because the one thing that I've noticed is that once this MMA fighter appears, she kind of stays in the same spot throughout the whole piece and doesn't drive as much intrigue here. So that's an area that I want to take a look at as well. But generally speaking, I'm super happy to see this and see that Kat took a chance on changing the project and putting her own spin on it. So props for that. All right, so let's jump into Artboard 1 here. And within Artboard 1, we have the octagon layer and then a stroke. So one thing is, without the stroke, this is just the octagon. And if I were to duplicate this octagon and push it off in space, if I go in here and just hit EE, and we can color pick, select the controller and color pick it up to the darker blue. And when we click off, it'll update. So the way Kat had this set up is it was a little bit smaller here. So let me go into scale. And instead of it going to 94, maybe it goes to 86. There we go. And then if we duplicate this one again, since it's the color that we want to end with, and 1, 2, let's push it same distance here. We're getting that same look here, and we'll drop this one down to, we went -8 on that one, so we'll do -8 again. So when this comes up, and maybe we'll drop this down to, I don't know, 10. And same with this. Oops. You're still getting the same look, but it just adds a little bit more depth to the piece. So even if you want something to end up as a stroke, just know that you can also use a fill over the top of it to make it feel like a stroke. That way you get a little bit more depth and width on as it's animating up. Great. All right, so I'll delete the stroke. Now that we're in here, we have these two gloves here. So if I hit U to reveal my keyframes here, I see that the positions are still linked together. So I'm actually going to separate those The reason I like to separate these is because it'll allow me to only animate on one axis. So anytime I can get down to distilling something down to only animating on one axis, that's what I like to do. Just gives you a little bit more control. So I'm actually going to delete these Y positions. And let me also hold Shift and hit R to pull up the rotations to make sure there's no rotation on there. Great. So now these are going to be moving across in the X axis. So they're coming in, boom. All right, so I need to obviously fix this a little bit. The glove left. Good job on naming those appropriately to make things easier for me to find. All right. So now, are we working just on one? Boom. Cool. All right, so let me highlight that and click on the graph editor. Highlight these. I'm going to hit F9. Go in here and select all these. F9, F9, F9. And I'm going to go in here and go to my value graph. So they're coming in slow. And I think we can pull this a little bit more. You want to see them start to come into the frame and then you want them attack, right? Kind of what a punch would look like as well. Might even need to go. And if this happens and you want this other handle, you want to break the tangents here, hold Alt or Option. And on one side, it'll allow you to break those tangents. All right. So, right, I'm looking at the left one. Yeah, I want it to be a steep curve because I want it to have an impact here. Boom. And then we'll make other things happen. And I'm going to hit this graph editor so that when I open this one, I can try and mimic everything in there in the other one so that I can get them to look as similar as possible. Now this one's going to be inverted because it's coming the other way. That's pretty close. Let's see. Let's just pull it out to that line to make that easier. All right, and now we need to hold Alt or Option. And cool. So there's a little bit more anticipation here as you see the gloves come in and then they collide with a little bit more force. So although I've made those changes and animated them on the one axis how I wanted to, Cat had them coming in at an angle, which is why the X and Y was both used. But a little trick for that is to go up here, make sure I'm in this comp, go up to Layer, New, Null Object. And I'm just going to call this ROT for rotation. So if I select both of these and parent them to the rotation, I can now rotate. So they are going to come at an angle, but I'm only animating one axis. And I might need to adjust this right glove a little bit to make sure that it starts off screen, or I can just tone my rotation down a touch. Maybe 14. Yeah, it's still off screen. Okay, we're good there. They start to enter and they collide. Cool. All right. So right as this impact happens, I would like to get into Artboard 2. And the reason is because Artboard 2 is the same color as the gloves. So that will help reinforce the, move it down one frame, reinforce the impact here a little bit more. And the other thing I'm going to do, maybe go one more down. The other thing I want to do with Artboard 2 is have some movement to it. So what happens with the impact is I want to reinforce that impact. And the way that I'm going to do that here with this is to scale it back. scale everything back that's in here. So let's go grab our null, turn it off, and let me unhide those. So if I select everything here and parent it to this null, I'm going to set the first keyframe and push it out 10 frames, and we can play with that. Let's just say 250. And maybe we want that to settle at 5 frames in. So this is going to jump out. So we want that curve to be pretty steep initially. And I'm going to fit to graph. I'm going to grab this one and drop it down so that we fly out pretty quickly. And then it takes a minute to settle. All right, so let's go back into stats so we can see how that looks. Definitely reinforces. I can probably move that up a frame. And that's all just tweaking. Let's see. All right, so for this transition, I actually think one of the things that you can do is run her off the other side and treat the canvas like a mirror. And what I mean by that is let me go in Artboard 2 and get out of my graph view here. Here's that PNG. So I'm going to separate these dimensions again. Why don't I just duplicate this real quick? Turn this off. So I'm just using this to demonstrate. If I go out this frame, and that'll be matted, obviously, I can use this to then come in this side of the frame. And since this is set up like a cube, like a 3D cube, I can try and rotate to make it feel like that, like the cube is pushing her out that side, but then she reappears from this side, especially since this is going to turn into the background. So to explain this and only use 2D here, let me delete that layer. Let me jump into Artboard 3 and let's create how she's going to come in here. And then I'll let you all figure out how to make that transition happen in Artboard 2. So let's double click and create a solid. All right, so we have our solid, and what we want to do is to make this rotate like it's a cube. So let's go up here and make this a 3D layer. And I want this to rotate with the anchor point further back, because if I rotate it like this, it's going to rotate around the anchor point that is in the middle of this shape layer. Let me undo. So what we need to do, if I hit Shift A to pull up the anchor point, because if I hit Command K here and pull up my settings here, the width of this comp is 1080. So I want to push the anchor point back by half of that. All right, so if I go to 540 and my anchor point, that scales this up. So I also need to go hit Shift P and pull up my position. And I also need to set my position to 540 because then that'll reset the shape layer into the correct spot. And now when I use Y rotation, it's going to rotate. And if I hit 90 here, it's going to hit the corners here and up here. So as I rotate this around, this way, and it's gonna hit the corners here too at negative 90. We can tie that together. So let me duplicate this layer, and I'm gonna hit R And I want to tie this layer's rotation to this layer so that we only have to worry about one layer. So just like we only worried about one axis, I only want to worry about one layer here and just put the animation on one layer. But I do need to twirl this down and say add 90 degrees so that it'll jump back and it's working correctly. There we go. And then it'll flip around. So this kind of looks like how Artboard 2 looked, right? Which is why I wanted to jump into Artboard 3 first. So you could create this and use that as your mat with one side with the text and the other side with her. And then you could animate her, and I use scale to when she goes to animate off, you could animate her out the side there and take down so that you kind of maintain that perspective. Just imagine that all stayed there. And then within Artboard 3 here, let me add a new layer. You could have her appear out of the side here as this spins around. So let's do that. So let me see what colors I'm going to end up here with. So I want it to be red background. Actually, what I could do is just tie it to this controller that Cat had set up. Lovely. And there we go. That way it's the right color. And then the second one would be the dark blue. Actually, just do that. Great. So I actually want let me get into my rotations here. There we go. This one's going to start at 90. I actually don't want this layer to appear yet. I'm going to animate this from 90, go maybe 15 frames, and take that to 0. And then the fighter is going to come in there too. So let's line up those keyframes. And the fighter can be, well, let's say we have a higher res image. Do that. And make sure fighter starts off the screen here. And then we can, let me toggle modes here so I get my track map. Say appear only here, and that automatically turns that off, so I got to turn it back on because I actually want to use that color as shape. Great. And this can just be an alpha thing too. Over the top of Artboard 2. And then you can adjust your, see, it's fill. That's the background, the front. So let's take this up to the top here. And I want it under the player or under the athlete. And also going to use that. Great. That new matte tool is so nice. And we just need to make sure that that fills the screen here. So I want to make sure that we start this only where we want it to start. You don't want to see the back side of that. All right. And then you could also push back. So now that you have this here, I actually don't think I need this second shape layer. Now that I have this here, I could also attach these two, parent them to that shape layer, and then make this scale back to reveal the other text that we had behind here, right? And then use that as the element that, so as this comes back and we reveal some of these text elements that we would make sure were still visible, then you could use that as an anticipation to get into artboard 4 here. So if I were to and then fly back, and then she shoots out, and as she's shooting out, let's just say 100. You could, let's just do a whole new, there we go. And then let's scale this down. Push that off 10 frames and say 0 for now. So it's pulling back, and then as it starts to shoot out, you can do a little repetition thing here too to reveal that. So here, let me cut this layer, and let's go into color, because we don't want that. I believe we would want the light blue color first. So if I duplicate and push 1, 2, 3, then this one could be the dark blue color, which is the background of the stats. Oh, I did that backwards. I want, see, I'd want to lead with the light blue. Yeah, and then I'd want to go red, and then I'd want to go dark blue as my last one. So let's duplicate. What I do wrong? Try that again. Hit EE to just reveal the color, and then I can go dark blue on that one. So you can see how you can use that as the breaking into the transitional element then too, which would also break up the athlete, so you don't see the MMA fighter the whole time. And I'd have to adjust some of the settings here, or the timing here. And let's go in and turn off some of these layers below just to get an idea of how all that's going to work. Let me see if that on. Could go with that background and the other background. Yeah. Obviously, this could use a lot of tweaking, and we'd want to blend. I'd probably copy these top 3 into Artboard 4 and use that as my reveal, so that I lined everything upright and matched exactly what you had here. But let me go back into stats, and yeah, I might play with this a little bit more, because I want the MMA fighter to go out that side without changing the shape of this. So then you could start this here and let's just say all of these start. All right, there we go. So boom, kind of coming over the top. So we need this back. We need to move this back. Handful of frames here. So in order for this to work, you'd have to sell it in this frame. So if you recreate this, you'd want these to start moving a little bit first. Like I'd want the names to start moving to the right, but you'd want it to move in a rotational fashion. Let me see. Let's get rid of those. And let's see what these layers have. Okay, so if I get rid of those, the shape shouldn't adjust. And check out what's in the background. These. You are kind of using the rotational elements here. So I think if you use what we did here to set up this rotational element, if that's how you initially set it up, you could tie them together. You could tie those shape layers together like I did here. And then when you rotate one, you rotate the other. So then it would carry on there for you. And obviously this one's scaled down that we didn't scale that one to match. So if we use that and you started to anticipate this one a little bit, it started to rotate just a touch, just a hint of it. And then this one came in and you animated this out, boom. And this one came in based on the rotational, or based on this transitional element here. That way you can, she appears like she comes in multiple places and you don't see her the whole time, which adds a little bit of intrigue and interest. And obviously I wouldn't keep that guy on. I need to get rid of that keyframe too. There we go. So slight rotation. And she pulls back almost like a slingshot, right? So you'd want to push some of those keyframes a little bit more so that she has a little bit more, let's see, scale. Let's just F9 those and stretch out. So she comes in and then it's like a slow fade back. And then we can push this forward a touch, but then we want it to really fly out. Maybe we want it more like this. So we want it to hang here for a second. And I'm just going to try and match this to the time that we already have. I would probably push everything else back. There we go. That's roughly and loosely decent time. if that makes sense. And hope that helps to open a project and see how a couple different changes can elevate a motion design project.